Welcome, everyone. I'm Mark Carpel. I'm on the board of Northampton Neighbors, and I'm part of the group that puts these talks together. And I am tickled pink to be introducing Judy Dixon, today's speaker. But before I do that, I want to share some coming attractions and say a word about the logistics for today. On October 9th, I'll move from behind the scenes to the podium, talk about self-taught visionary builders, people who work, almost all of them work completely alone, sometimes for decades, using materials considered trash by other people to create spectacular, monumental outdoor environments. Following that, local authors Joe Gannon on October 23rd and Tracy Kidder on November 13th will take the virtual podium. And on December 4th, our own Linda Desmond and Kathy Service, both internationally recognized professionals in dementia care, will share their thoughts, theories, and best practices on how people living with dementia can live at home longer through compassionate, person-centered care. We hope you'll join us for all of those. Now about today. Nina Kleinberg, wave your hand, Nina. Nina Kleinberg, our Zoom impresario, will mute everyone during Judy's talk. Judy will talk for about 30 minutes. You'll be able to send questions to her by typing them into the chat feature of Zoom, which is at the bottom center of your screen. If you hit that, it'll let you write a question and we'll catch up later. When Judy's finished, I'll read as many as I can for her to answer. And if we read all of them and we have more time, you can wave your hand and you can unmute yourself so you can ask a question out loud. Now to Judy. Judy Dixon has done just about everything and excelled at just about everything in the world of tennis. As a player, a teacher, a coach, and a journalist. First, as a tennis player, at 17, she was ranked in the top 20 women's tennis players in the US. That year, she won the National Junior Indoor Championship and became Billie Jean King's doubles partner. Over 50 years later, they're still friends. Turning pro, she played at the US Open, at Wimbledon, and on the Virginia Slims Tour. In 2008, she was inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame. As a coach and a teacher, in 1974, she joined Yale University as the women's athletic coordinator and the women's tennis coach. 1 year later, she sued Yale, becoming the first person to use Title IX to bring a lawsuit against a major university, demanding better conditions for women athletes and staff in the Yale Athletics Department, and you'll hear a lot more about that today. She has helped organize corporate clinics for the US Open with past world champions Virginia Chris Evert and Tracy Austin. In 1996, Judy founded the Women's Tennis Camp, a summer weekend of tennis instruction for women taught by women coaches held at the Umass tennis courts, and I've heard that described as a life-changing event. She was recruited by the University of Massachusetts Amherst as its head women's tennis coach in 1992. She coached the women's team for 25 years and the men's team for 8. Her record making her the winningest tennis coach in UMass history. She was the Wilson Collegiate Coach of the Year in 2017. She was awarded the A10 Coach of the Year award 5 times and has been inducted into the UMass Hall of Fame. She retired from coaching in 2017, but went out with a bang when her team won the A10 tournament that year. As a journalist, she was the first woman to offer color commentary for professional sports, working as a commentator for NBC, PBS, and as a guest commentator for ABC's Eye on Sport. She was the first woman to be nominated for an Emmy Award in sports broadcasting. For a while, she owned a tennis health club in Sunderland, Massachusetts, which some of you will remember. At 71, Judy continues to play very competitively. In 2018 and 19, she was on the US Senior World Tour team, which brought home gold medals both years. and she was named to this year's Super Senior 70 World Team that was scheduled to compete in just a few weeks in Mallorca, Spain, until it was canceled by COVID-19. Judy is currently ranked #2 in the US and top 10 in the world in the 70 and over division. Finally, Judy serves on the boards of Girls Inc. and Moving On Up with Tennis and Education, started by Arthur Ashe, where she and other volunteers provide free tennis lessons, rackets, and other supplies to over 70 girls aged 6 to 18 in the greater Springfield area. Judy rarely talks about her accomplishments. I've known her for 15 years and I didn't know half of this stuff until I started researching this. So we thought it'd be nice for her to be joined today by her wife, Suzanne Slater, a superb local couples therapist and former chair of the Women's Fund Board, who knows better than anyone how to get Judy to toot her horn a little bit.
Or a lot.
So thanks, Mark. Before we get into the talk, really, I'm aware that today Justice Ginsburg is lying in state, the first woman to be accorded this honor. And I wanted to start talking by mentioning her words that say, real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. Hopefully in the next half hour to an hour, you'll see how I try to take my one step. So I grew up, I was in the baby boomer generation, and I grew up where women and girl athletes were never taken seriously. And for some of you that are around my age, you might remember playing basketball or trying to play basketball where we were allowed to dribble 3 times only. We were not allowed to go over the center line. And if we dribbled 4 times, perhaps it might mean that you would never have children. I'm not quite sure what the 4th dribble was supposed to be a problem about, but that's what happened. My venue happens to be tennis, so I will speak a lot about that. But I'll also go back to, I played a lot of sport in high school. I played field hockey. I played basketball, as I said, and when we played contests, we were playing play dates, only play dates. So after we had the contest, there was punch and cookies for all of the girls. I was not allowed to play tennis on the weekends at all before 12 o'clock. Those hours were put aside for men only. And that's because men were seen as working and women obviously not working. And also I was not allowed as a female, young female athlete, I was not allowed in the men's only grill at the local country club, even though my name was on the wall as being the club champion. So these are just some of the things that I noticed when I was very young growing up. I gained national recognition early on as a young girl and as a teenager. And then at age 17, I met Billie Jean. I played 2 tournaments with Billie Jean, both in the state of Massachusetts. And Billie Jean taught me a lot of things. She taught me to train more seriously, to take myself more seriously. She taught me the great adage, this is Billie Jean's quote, pressure is a privilege. And she mostly taught me about having a voice.
So I'm going to ask you to tell them about the actual environment in which these conversations happened, because that's a sweet little moment.
So remembering that I was 17 years old at the time, and she had asked me to play doubles with her. Firstly, when the match was going on, I tried to take as little space as possible. She was #1 in the world, and I was, I don't know what, as a junior, but certainly not #1 in the world. And after each match, I would go to the locker room and I would burst into tears from just trying to get it right. But the best part was at night, we were housed together, and housing back then happened because there was no prize money. So when you were playing a tournament, you were often staying with the local people. And I was local in Massachusetts with Billie Jean, and we were in bunk beds, believe it or not. She was in the bottom bunk and I was in the top bunk. And when the lights went out at night, that's when the discussions happened. And they were all about having a positive voice, taking a stand, doing what's right, and making sure that I took myself more seriously. And it was probably some of the most important 2 weeks of my life. So after I graduated from high school, I went on to the University of Southern California with no scholarship, no tennis scholarship, because there were not any tennis scholarships for women at the time. I never attended a team practice at all. I attended all of the matches, and when I attended the matches, I had to meet my teammates for the first time. I was thrown a t-shirt at the time and put on a USC t-shirt. The men at that time were given a free membership to the Los Angeles Tennis Club. My parents had to pay for the membership at that club. And then one day, when I was about 21 years old, I'm on the court with my doubles partner. We were #1 in Southern California. We played #1 on the USC team. And we were playing against a woman named Louise Bruff. Louise Bruff had won 6 Grand Slam singles titles. And she was ranked at one time #1 in the world. There were 24 courts at the LA Tennis Club, and 4 older men, older than 80, walked out on the court where we were, and 23 vacant courts, and said, "You'll have to get off. We want this court." And at that time, I packed up and I began to be very angry, but I was humiliated for her. And it began to make me feel like, how is this fair? This isn't possible. But I was mostly concerned about what was happening to her as #1 in the world. How could she be feeling right then? And so that kind of feeling sort of stayed with me. I graduated from college, and I went on to play on the Virginia Slims tour for a couple of years. And to note, today is the 50th anniversary of the original 9. And for those of you that play tennis, today is the first day that you saw the picture of the original 9 holding up $1, which made them be professionals for the first time. And because the men's game was growing faster than the women's game at that time, there were not enough tournaments for women. In 1973, when I was playing Wimbledon, Billie Jean asked anybody who was interested to please come to the ballroom of the local hotel in London, closed the door of the hotel, and she said, "We are going to take the Virginia Slims tour and we're going to morph it into the WTA, which is the Women's Tennis Association, the Players Union for women's tennis." She said then, "We weren't sure of our destiny, but we knew it was in our hands for the first time." Virginia Slims Tour became the WTA at that point. And also remembering that the United States Tennis Association threatened all of the women who were going to join the WTA and said, "If you join, we will make sure that you cannot come back and play at the USTA events." Chris Evert did not join the WTA. She stayed with the USTA. So that's important to know as we go along. So much work went into starting the women's tour that to this day, Billie Jean sleeps late in the morning because she is still tired from having to put out all of the energy and all of the media support that she had to over those years. So again, like I said, I played pro tennis for 2 years, and then I was about to retire.
So I want to just clarify that you were living in LA during these years, the USC college years, and while you were on the tour, your sort of location was LA. And what I'm always prompting you to tell people is there were some fairly glamorous, fun, celebrity-oriented parts of being a known tennis star in LA at that time. So can you treat us to a tale or two about some of the names that our viewers will certainly know?
Sure. First of all, it is true that tennis players and famous movie stars and music stars and have some sort of camaraderie. And so the good was, it was very glamorous living in Los Angeles at that time. And certainly there's some very good stories that go along with that. And I also have to say that some of the glamour to the tour was, the travel and signing autographs for the first time, driving through the Wimbledon gates for the first time, knowing that you were a player in a Wimbledon car. But life in LA was a very heady experience for me. I met for the first time Marilyn and Alan Bergman, who happened to be, after 50 years, some of my lifelong friends. They are very famous Academy Award-winning lyricists and wrote The Way We Were. I played tennis with Gene Kelly. I played tennis at Diana Ross's house. I went to Las Vegas as Diana Ross's guest and stayed and was seated at her private booth. We went to a recording session by Sarah Vaughan. We also played a tournament called Tea and Crumpets, which was at various courts in Beverly Hills on the weekends, and then culminating in a huge party at Hugh Hefner's house. And finally playing tennis with Barbra Streisand, going to her home for movies at her house, and also going as a 22-year-old as her private guest, and again, sitting at a table, her private table in Las Vegas. These kinds of things, you can't make this up as a 22-year-old. But there are also some hard things, you know, being on the tour. Some of the hard things were the four walls at your hotel room, week after week after week. So even though you were in London or you're in Paris or you're in Gstaad, Switzerland, the hotel looks the same. And you keep traveling and you keep traveling and you keep traveling. And so you're missing family events, you're missing parties, you're missing your friends, you're missing all your holidays. I never was able to celebrate my birthday on my birthday until I was about 26 years old. So those are some of the harder things. But then I retired after I played Wimbledon, because that was the goal in my life, was to play Wimbledon. And I retired after that, and here comes Yale. So in 1969, Yale admitted 750 women for the first time to the university. Kingman Brewster was the president at Yale University at the time. He fought against bringing women in as long as he could. In 1973, Sam Chauncey, who was secretary to the university, to the president of the university, called me and offered me the job to coach the women's tennis team for $4,500. Now remember that the men's tennis coach at the time was getting paid $28,000. I refused the job. And a week later, he called me up and he offered the job of coordinator of women's athletics and being a tennis coach. And at that time, they offered me $24,000. So I said yes to that. I reported to the director of physical education, who was a woman, and this is important to know, I think, as we move along. The men's sports reported to the director of athletics. There were 7 varsity sports, no full-time coaches. There was no access to trainers. In fact, if you needed to use a trainer at the time and you were a woman, you could stand in line waiting. And if in fact a male came, they could butt right in front of you. And so oftentimes women were late to practices. There were no locker rooms. And I was privy to anemic budgets. There was also something called Friends of Yale Tennis, which controlled all of the funds for the men's and women's teams that were given by alums. I had nothing, I had no way to access those funds. And I will show you that in a minute. There were also 4 indoor tennis courts at Yale. And I practiced, our team with 12 players were given 1. And the men's team with 12 players was given 3.
Now, as these events are developing steam inside you, this theme of being constantly treated unequally from a sexist standpoint, I know that there was a culminating event that really turned the tide for you. Can you tell us about that event?
So one day I decided I sort of had enough, and we were at the indoor tennis courts, and I said to the women on my team, we are going to have 2 courts today, and I'm going to run a practice on one court with 8 of you, and the other 4 are going to go to the other court. No matter what happens, I want you just to keep hitting the tennis ball, keep hitting the tennis ball. So I went on the court. I stood at the service line with a bucket of balls, and I was feeding balls to the 8 on my court. And I hear from the other coach, from the male coach, I want you to go over and serve. And so he was indicating to 4 of the men on the men's team that he wanted them to come to the baseline, stand behind me with a bucket of balls, and begin serving, which would obviously hit me in the head, hit me in the back, all this kind of thing. And I kept looking at my women who were very frightened, and I kept feeding. And then I heard the male coach I said, serve. And then I hear from a young man named Chris Swenson, who was captain of the men's team at that time and who I had known growing up. I heard him say, I can't do this. And he walked off the court, and he took his 3 teammates with him, and they did not go ahead and abuse me, physically assault me, or anything like that. They walked off the court, thank goodness. And from that day on, we were given 2 courts. But that was sort of, for me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I decided in 1975 to file a complaint with the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, reporting to the Office of Civil Rights. They come and they go ahead and they look to see if there is a reason for the suit to continue. They investigate to see if there's discrimination, and indeed they found that there was. In the meantime, they had to notify Yale that such a thing was going on. And then the findings came back. I had to go ahead and hire a lawyer on contingency, and we filed a suit with Yale. This is the first such lawsuit brought against a major university.
So can you be clear with people about on whose behalf you filed that suit? Was it a personal suit or a broader suit?
So it was a suit on behalf of women's coaches and on behalf of the women's sports team, not for me personally. I was not looking for any money for myself. I was just looking for women's sports to be upgraded at Yale. And the suit reflected that. Immediately after the suit was filed, all hell broke loose and things moved quickly. I went to the store 3 days after the suit was filed, and my picture was on the front page of the New Haven Register. I was on the sports page of the New York Times, and also John Lindsay, who was the ex-mayor of New York City, interviewed me for a segment on Ion Sport. And interestingly to note that Yale alums tried to stop this show on the Ion Sport. There was a gun control program on the same hour, and no one tried to stop that program as much as they tried to stop the Yale expose. So Yale retaliated. And I went into I went into my office in the summer, and I found out that Yale had restructured, which is the new way that they do it, and they're going to fire you. They just restructure. So they took away my job, and they made me head of media relations for women. I knew nothing about media relations. And they put my office in the copy machine at the Ray Tompkins house. So my office was a little cubicle where the copy machine and the coffee machine were. And that's where I sat with no privacy. So this is a copy, you can see, of the suit, 156 pages of interrogatories that I had to endure for years. But in the meantime, Sam Chauncey, who hired me, again, secretary to King and Brewster, took me to Maury's. Now, if you remember the time, Maury's was a men's club only in 1973. And in 1974, they allowed women for the first time. So interestingly enough, he took me there and he offered me $15,000 to let go of the case. And he told me at that time that I could be replaced and that no one would ever remember what had occurred. Subsequently, about 8 months after the suit, after giving deposition after deposition, I resigned. And about 2 weeks before the case was to come to court, I got a note from Yale saying they were going to upgrade all of the women's facilities. They were going to give women equal access to trainers, full-time coaches, expanded budgets, more varsity sports, but I was not allowed to talk to the press for 5 years. And in 2006, Yale asked me to come back to the Yale Club in New York City to be honored and be part of a commemoration of the history of Yale women's tennis. However, they asked me not to mention the suit. Interestingly enough, sitting at my table at that time was Chris Swenson. And so when I finished my talk, he got up and said, Judy's been asked not to speak about the suit, but I myself was there at the time, and I'll tell you the story.
So that was certainly a culminating moment in your career and your commitment to activism. But your career went way on after that for many years. So can you tell us about some of the things you've done since Yale?
So Mark mentioned that I received a nomination for an Emmy in sports broadcasting. So after I left Yale, I decided that I would try a career in sports broadcasting. So I went to NBC in New York City, and I was interviewed for about an hour there. And at the end of the interview, I was told by the NBC person, I'm sorry that we would like to hire you, but not on a full-time basis, just on a piecemeal kind of thing. Because if we are going to hire full-time women sports broadcasters, it's going to be someone like Phyllis George, who was at that time an ex Miss America. So that, again, that was a whole thing with my brain about it. Here, we're not getting very far in this women's being able to have some kind of seriousness about women. So then after that, years go by, and I ended up at University of Massachusetts coaching the men's team and the women's team. I was one of 7 women coaching a Division I men's program, which I loved. I'm now retired at Umass. And as Mark said, I compete at a world level. The women's camp that I started years and years ago was a way for me to teach women with my friends, really. This is what happened. I ended up hiring many of my friends to teach this. It ended up being one of the most fun things we did during the year. And it also became a model for other potential camps around the country. And now, besides competing, I'm involved in something called Moving Up with Tennis and Education, which is a national junior tennis league program offering free instruction to children in the greater Springfield area. I am firmly in the avenue of continuing to stand up for fairness, whether it's private moments or in a public forum. Big things happen, I believe, when you take one small step at a time. And I'm not brave. I didn't start out by trying to test the teeth of Title IX. That was not what I was trying to do. I saw and experienced unfairness, and I acted with a belief that I felt like I just couldn't tolerate anymore. And I hold on to that belief today. So, Mark.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Judy, thank you so much. I mentioned at the beginning that I didn't know half. I don't think I knew a fifth. And I don't think I would have had the courage to do a quarter of what you did. I'm really impressed, and I'm very grateful for your sharing with us. So for those who want to learn more about Judy and what she's doing, we're going to put up a slide that has her website information, judydixontennis.com, and you'll find a lot of interesting things there, including all kinds of free tennis tips, which we can see on the second slide. Each of those is its own little thing, and there's a whole bunch more. One of them says 15 tips to improve your team's match odds. And lastly, we'll just show you one slide with a few pictures from moving on up in Springfield. So now a word from our sponsor. Northampton Neighbors is a member-based nonprofit offering volunteer services, programs, and events to older people who want to continue living independent, engaged lives in their homes and communities with a little neighborly help. We launched nearly 3 years ago, and by the time COVID-19 arrived, we had delivered over 1,700 services to our 900 members. That's going shopping for them, bringing them to a doctor's appointment, sometimes doing some cleaning, taking out an air conditioner, flipping mattresses, things like that. And we also provided a variety of ways for members to get together socially. During COVID-19, we can't deliver in-person services until it's safe to do so for our volunteers and members. But we're still going strong with regular calls to members who feel isolated, recently letters and artwork to members from local children and teens, neighborhood circles and special interest groups that meet remotely, tech help from the Divine Kleinberg, socially distanced yard work, and the speaker series that we now often offer twice a month. Unlike almost all organizations like ours, which are called virtual retirement villages. Northampton Neighbors has no dues, fees, or charges for any of the services or social opportunities we provide. That means we have to work hard to find funds elsewhere to keep the organization going. We hope you'll make a contribution to Northampton Neighbors. It's easy to do. And I want to give a shout out to Hester Cashman and her friends in York, England, who've already made a donation in appreciation for Judy's talk today. We hope you'll join Hester. You can donate online at our website, which you can see in front of you there, either with a credit card or PayPal, or by mailing your check to Northampton Neighbors, Post Office Box 231, Northampton, Mass. 01061. And now we have time for some questions and answers, if there are. They love it, they love it, they love it, but I don't see any questions. So we could do the, Nina, I suppose we could do the unmute thing.
Well, there is a question.
I'm sorry.
There's one asking, can you speak more about Title IX and the attempts to weaken its provisions?
Oh, thank you. Oh yeah, I didn't see that. Go with it.
So for me now, I mean, I feel like we're in a very scary time with Justice Ginsburg's death, and with the idea that our current president could, again, push through another Supreme Court justice who would be very, very conservative and really go after Roe v. Wade. I mean, I think the important thing for sport is that COVID, it's very scary right now because with COVID right now, athletic departments are looking at sports as in terms of what can they afford. And football has its own power. And there are athletic departments right now that are cutting out tons of sports, tennis being one of them. And a lot of women's sports are being dropped, discontinued or whatever, because they're talking about trying to keep the revenue producing sports only. In terms of what happened to me, I did mention that the woman I reported to, Johnny Barnett, who was the director of physical education at Yale, was absolutely, positively one of my biggest enemies while I was doing this. And she tried to stop exactly what I was doing because she said, you're going to wreck it for other women. In terms of what's happening now, even though we've taken great strides and we've come forward, it's not enough, and it's not set in stone. And that's the hard part. And that's why the history of this is so important, because for someone like my daughter who played soccer on a scholarship, she has no idea what the fight was, and that this fight can be overturned at any minute based on what the government decides. And that's why we can't let any of this go now. And that's why Billie Jean is still, day after day after day, still pushing for you must step up and act out.
Okay.
There's more.
How are you saying?
All right, why don't you read them, Suzanne?
Okay, here's one. Please talk more about the formation of the WTA, those who helped form it and those who declined. Name names, Jude.
So we know about the original 9, right? So if I name names, it would be some that you don't know. It would be Christy Pigeon, Julie Heldman, who was Gladys Heldman's daughter, Billie Jean, Rosie Casals, Val Ziegenfuss, Peaches Barkowitz, Nancy Ritchie, Carrie Melville, and someone named Judy Tegart. Those are the original 9. It really, at that point, and I told you that Chris Everett was one that declined. The basis of the rest of the people joining was for people like me that were not in the higher echelon. It was important for the WTA to gather a base of support from players like me, and not be frightened to do that. In terms of who joined the WTA, it had enough teeth coming out of that meeting and the subsequent 5-6 months that the USTA had to give in. So really, basically, it was about 80% of the rest of the base of the players that were taking part at Wimbledon that year joined the WTA, and we all had to sign a piece of paper saying that we would do so. And then the USTA backed down. So it wasn't a matter of important players after that. It was that the original 9 led us, they led us, and then the rest of us signed on. How accurate was the movie Battle of the Sexes and Billie Jean and Bobby Riggs? Not. That is my answer to that. The press called me actually and asked me how I was very friendly with Billie Jean during that time. That movie was not accurate. It was, the timing of it was all squished together because they had to get it into movie form. And also, as we know, sex sells. So that was not accurate as it sort of played out. And where Larry King was supposedly in the room, in the locker room, and Marilyn Barnett was there, and all during the Bobby Riggs time, that did not occur. So there were a lot of things that just were there to sell them, even though at the end, it says Billie Jean sort of signed off on it. But yeah, it was not, and it was not my favorite movie, that's for sure.
So Judy, we have a question from Sarah. Your story is so inspiring. I'm wondering if you know specifically how your example may have changed women's sports at other universities, and did it change what was happening for other women's programs, sports and other, at Yale?
So first I'll speak to the Yale one. After the soup, when they hired full-time coaches, that was huge. I was hired at Yale to coach the women's team when the previous coach had been fired. The previous coach was a woman who would hand a can of tennis balls to the kids on the team and then go sit in her car and listen to music. And then the women would hit back and forth. And then after 2 hours were up, they'd come back and hand her the can of balls. She was fired for that, but no kidding. But at Yale, once they hired full-time coaches, things changed. And also what happened at Yale, which was worse than at other Princeton, and they did it better, but Yale never asked the women what kind of sports they wanted. They just said, here are the sports we think you should have. After the suit, they asked the Yale women, what sports would you like to compete in? And they then hired full-time coaches. So things changed, and they changed so much that years ago when I was coaching at Umass and I went back with the team to Yale, and my picture with the teams at that time is up on the wall in the indoor tennis courts. The Yale tennis coach told her team, this is the reason that we have come so far here at Yale Athletics. And this is the woman that helped push this along. So that was great. So absolutely it changed. Now at other schools, I know that Brown University, a friend of mine sued Brown years ago for something similar. Maybe she sued them maybe about 15 years ago. But I think that athletic directors are a little bit more careful. I know at the University of Massachusetts, they had a whole study about were they in compliance with Title IX. This is when Glenn Wong was acting athletic director. One of the things he did was to put someone in charge of taking a look at the sports at at UMass, and making sure that at least they were in compliance or moving toward compliance. If you're going to be in compliance with Title IX, you have to have 2 out of the 3 prongs and moving in that direction. Now, some of the schools say, yes, we're moving in that direction, and that's enough, even though it's taken 25 years to move in that direction. So it isn't enough. But that's, at least there's some movement.
I'm not seeing any, but you may be getting some that I'm not. So see if you see anything else.
I would like Judy to speak on how she changed some women's players' lives.
Yeah.
Ay.
Well, think about it from your team, maybe, from Umass.
Okay, where's Chanel? Chanel, are you there? So maybe
Judy,
not.
I'm here.
Okay, so that question's to you, honey.
But tell
Can you say it again?
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so let me introduce who this is. This person who is going to speak is Chanel Glasper, who was captain of the women's team at the University of Massachusetts. a really, well, now she's at law school, finishing up law school
Yes.
at Oklahoma, right? And so maybe she can speak a little bit about what, that question, because that's a little bit more than I feel comfortable doing.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, I would like Judy to speak on how she has changed some women players' lives.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's easy. Okay, so, gosh, Judy's been really great. Judy pushes all of her players to be better human beings, I think. So when I came in, Judy called me, my nickname was Queenie, because I was a little spoiled, not used to sharing. I like to boss people around a lot, most of which are still true, but I feel like I've matured a lot to take other people's feelings under consideration and just be a lot more humble. I know a lot of players just didn't have a lot of confidence to maybe step out on their own. And Judy really challenged us and empowered us to make us feel like we were powerful women. I mean, Judy being our coach and just hearing her story about how she's challenged so many institutions and the status quo is just really inspiring. And you can't really play for her for 4 years and not pick up some of that energy. So all of the girls that have graduated have gone on to do great things, many of them master's degrees, traveling, have great careers. And I think that's just a testament of what kind of coach Judy is. All of us have had great grades. We're really leaders, a very respected program. And she just continues to advocate for us. So I got my master's and now I'm in law school, and I don't think I would have gone down that path had I had any other coach, because I really felt confident to have conversations within the athletics department, which allowed me to make connections and end up where I am now. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Chanel. Bye. So this another one says, strategies from the tennis challenge you would suggest for U.S. women's soccer who continue to confront the difference between professional men's and women's soccer. Yeah, this is really hard. This is really hard, and it's really hard for me to watch, because this is one of those places where with all of the accolades and all of the success that the women's soccer team has had, and all of the media support, and yet the U.S. Soccer Association is doing what they're doing. And it's hard, again, it's hard because there are such role models that have come out of the U.S. soccer team. And Rapinoe now, and Mia Hamm back when my daughter was playing soccer. I think that one of the ways to go, you have to go through the courts right now. I think that's one of the few ways, is that they've done everything they can. I mean, obviously I would get the Women's Sports Foundation involved. I would get the media involved as much as possible, and I would go through the courts. If I were to do this, I would have huge conversations with Billie Jean, and I would let her take this on also as an advocate, because you need to get people that are powerful and that have some clout. But this is one of the sad things of women's sport right now. And I know that they've tried and tried and tried, and they've done everything they can. I have no great solutions for this, but I feel like the courts, Women's Sports Foundation, and media would be the best way. And after that, the refusal to play, it would maybe the only other thing that they have in front of them is, because they're so successful, maybe it's time that we become less successful and refuse to play unless they're granted equal access to funds.
Do you want to tell the story of Mariah and Billy?
Oh, so I'll tell a story about why history is important. Years ago, Billie Jean came to the University of Massachusetts as a guest speaker for graduation, and she stayed at our house. And after graduation was over, after the ceremony was over, it was raining that day, and my daughter was playing soccer, local soccer at the high school level. And I asked Billie Jean if she would go to watch Mariah play soccer, and she said yes, for sure. And then I asked her if she would speak to Mariah's team, and she said, I would not only speak to Mariah's team, I would like to speak to the opposing team. So after the game was over, and what I found is that all the parents wanted to stand near me that day because Billie Jean was there. But the kids didn't know who Billie Jean was at all. So we went over to speak to the team after the game was over, and I asked my daughter, I said, why don't you introduce Billie Jean instead of me? And she said, sure, okay, I'll do it. So she gets up in front of both teams and she says, this is Billie Jean King. She's a friend of the family. And that was the whole intro to Billie Jean. And when we got home, I had a few words to say, and she said, well, how would I know what she did? How would I know? I mean, she's just a friend of the family. And that's when I really thought the young people need to know the history of where they came and whose shoulders they stand on, because if they don't know how fragile the shoulders are, all of this can go away.
Let's see, anything else?
There's John Breitbart. I remember when she came to visit, I went to that game too. Yes, and you probably stood next to Billie Jean too, John. Yes.
So if there are people who want to ask a question out loud, you can unmute yourself and do that. And right now I'm having trouble seeing everybody. So again, I'm hoping Nina will recognize people if they want to do that.
I can see them if they unmute themselves. Right now, no one has unmuted themselves.
Okay.
No, well, there was one person who was on, Mark, you should just know, Gladys, who anybody who's come to the women's tennis camp knows that Gladys, when I first started the women's tennis camp, she was one of the older campers then. Now, I mean, I don't know if she's still on, but I know she's in her 90s. And she for sure was the oldest camper, and she was still learning and still trying to learn. She kept trying to learn to spin serve, and she was over 90.
And
well,
3 full days.
Yeah, it was 3 full, and it was 3 full days. As I've gotten older, the number of days has gotten shorter, but for Gladys, she still go for the 3 full days.
well, this is especially inspiring for us Northampton neighbors people, because we ain't chickens.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, unless there's anything else, I can't see if there is.
Yes, Mark, Jonathan Lim Breitbart has unmuted. Perhaps they
Good.
have a question.
Yes, well, I just want, Judy, it's wonderful to see you. Judy was a coach of mine from when I was a little kid, actually starting in, I think, middle school maybe. I did she also, one thing she didn't talk about is the Umass tennis camps that she ran for all the years that she also was the coach there. And she also spent time with us after school, outside of her coaching duties and her camp duties and all of that. She trained us, several of my friends and I, after school at a Hampshire Athletic Center and at Umass. And so she's been coaching young students up through high school and then obviously at college for years and years and years. Has been an inspiration to us all as well. I also want to say, the most amazing thing, though, we still remember this, and some of my friends still talk about it, is the player that Judy was and still is. There was one time, I think, which she was talking about consistency and sort of consistent strokes and that sort of thing. And she would hit the ball, I think, one time, I think we counted over 100 strokes in a row that she had hit perfectly without missing. And so this was just mind-boggling as a young player, but also sort of the life lessons that were imparted during those tennis lessons. So I just wanted to say that aspect that maybe wasn't emphasized as much here, that people should know as well.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I have to say that in the tennis camps that I ran at UMass in the summers, one of the things that I wanted to do was to offer tennis camps for everybody, for the masses. So I didn't charge a lot, and I wasn't looking to make players go to Wimbledon. I just wanted to offer, I think tennis is such a great sport, and I wanted to make sure that anybody that wanted could come, that there was equal access for sure to everybody in the town. So someone wrote, thank you so much for all you've done in the history lesson. I think you make a very important point about the importance of young people learning about the history and also what needs to be done to ensure equality in women's athletics. This is why we have people like Chanel Glassberg, right? That is why we have people like her who move on and become a lawyer and then perhaps will use this history to make her own mark. You know, for me, it was, if I can touch one person and make a difference by that one person, that one person carries it on. And that's why there are people like Chanel now that carry on what I've done. The ball is in her court now.
Nina, are you seeing anybody else who's unmuting?
Yes, Brenda Carter has unmuted.
Uh-oh. Okay.
I can tell the real story.
Oh, no, yeah, no.
Not really. I just wanted to say a couple of words. I've been a friend of Judy's for several years. We're in the same age group, and luckily I've been able to play tennis with her. But inspiringly, I've had the great opportunity to watch and be with her teams, watch her coach and be with her teams. And she is what you are hearing, but the greatest thing is that she is very firm, but she's very fair at all times. She doesn't mind letting somebody know they're doing wrong. She praises when they're doing right. And I think that is just huge. And I just appreciate her. I appreciate her friendship, and I appreciate what she's done for women's sports, having been somewhat involved in women's sports and myself. So thank you, Judy. This was great.
Thanks, Brenda. And for those of you that are on, you should know that Brenda Carter was ranked #1 in the world at one point, at one age group. And she was the captain of the gold medal team that I was on. She pulled me through a few matches by sitting behind me and telling me to shut up, I think. Myself, I think so. Anyway, yeah, so we played doubles. I think we played the last COVID tournament together, right? And we won.
Yes, we did. Yes,
so,
we did.
Thank you.
With a win.
Yes, thank you. Okay, Mark.
All right. Actually, I'm just going to share two quick things that I hadn't planned to. One is a story about one of my best friends who, when he took up tennis, I mentioned it to Judy, and she said, "Oh, I'll give him a lesson." You know, she didn't charge him anything. He has since become a tennis fanatic. This was probably 15 years ago. He lives in North Carolina. He plays like every day. He has seen a lot of tennis pros for lessons, and he tells me that's still the best lesson he ever had.
Oh, that's nice.
The other thing is that I remember one thing Judy said that stays with me very strongly. She said, "The only ball that matters is the one that's coming at you right now."
That's
So if people want to give a little sign of applause or whatever, you can unmute yourself and do that. And thank you, Judy and Suzanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.